The subject matter of this video is, I think, timeless. In recent years, recent months, have brought to the United States tumultuous times, both in the United States and elsewhere around the world. But then, in a sense, there is always something brewing and percolating. There is always enough trouble, sin, and sorrow, as well as, thank the Lord, grace, redemption, and joy. But for the moment, perhaps, while we have a moment, I want to reflect with you about our own diaconate community as well as beyond our own neighborhood. Specifically, I want us to meet each other. And in meeting each other, we have to be cognizant of the culture in which we swim. Part of this culture is infected with what some have called America's original sin. And that sin is racism. It's loosely called an original sin because, like what we know of the Christian understanding of original sin, it is something that runs deep, that can course through us too often with us unaware. It can affect our perceptions and our choices. We know that our original sin distorts our thinking, sometimes causing us to call what is evil good and what is good evil. So too is it with racism. Those who are like us are held aloof because we don't see them correctly. We can't see our own friends, our own brothers and sisters. Sometimes it is intentional, and that is wrong. Sometimes it is just ignorance, and if it is an ignorance willfully sustained, our guilt lies not being motivated to open our eyes. But joy comes when we find our brothers, our sisters, and see them as family, as neighbors, as relations, as children of God. And we say, praise the Lord. The point of this video is not to assess blame. Neither is it to name victims and oppressors. The ambition of this video and the several to follow it are far, far more modest. The intention is simply for our community to know itself better and to begin somewhere rather than being overwhelmed and thereby rendered immobile. Indeed, I think of a book by Chicago father Lou Camelli. It's called The Devil You Don't Know. He talks about the situations where the difficulties freeze us into inaction because, it's just all too big. It's too complicated. It's too impossible. It is in those sorts of times that we surrender to the evil. At that point, Father Camelli says, think of the diabolical. To be overwhelmed because of impossibility or difficulty runs counter to what we know from the New Testament. With God, all things are possible. Anyway, the method pursued here in this video and the ones that follow it is a form of theological reflection that I personally favor. It is in 4 steps, which can be characterized as step number 1. What are the facts? What are all the data? Look again. Look deeper. Don't let your own predispositions blind you to what is there. Step number 2. What does human learning tell us about those facts? That is to say, the psychologists, the physicians, the sociologists, the anthropologists, the political scientists, all those different university departments. What are they telling us about what we see? Are there patterns? What are they? What is significant? What is not significant? Step 3 of theological reflection, after we've gathered the data and taken a look at it with our human wits and intelligence and learning, step number 3 is to ask, what does our faith tell us about these facts? What does Scripture, the teachings of the magisterium, our tradition, the writings of our church today, the writings of our bishops? What does our faith tell us about what human learning tells us? For example, just because we know how to do something doesn't mean that we should do it. How does our faith guide us in that sort of question? The fourth step. After we've gathered the facts deeply and analyzed them smartly and judged them by our faith prayerfully, only then do we move to do something. Only then do we know what direction in which to move. It is in the fourth step that is where we begin to say how something ought to be fixed, or ought to be changed, or ought to be resolved. You will note that in assessing, thinking, and praying, all that precedes doing. So too with this project. This project is only about step one, about gathering some facts. And the way I'm going to do this is to take one small bite by interviewing 4 of our deacons, 2 African American deacons and 2 Hispanic deacons. The plan is to release videos one by one of the 4 different interviews. The first one I offer with this video is an interview with Deacon Jim Norman. These interviews, all 4, are part of a step number 1, the fact-gathering phase. You will not hear any policy prescriptions. There will not be an assessment as to whether Deacon Jim's experience is typical, nor will we breathe a word of politics or policy prescriptions about what is to be done. No, as I indicated, the first step is to find out who I am talking to. If racism is part of my original sinfulness, then I need to meet my neighbor, and he needs to meet me, and both of us meeting one another with charity and with trust. Without that, there is little hope for us to move forward. And so, let us move forward with the conversation. I spoke with Deacon Jim Norman during the late summer, and what you see here is an edited version of a longer conversation. I tried to keep it moving and eliminate my hems and haws so that we don't overstay our welcome with you in offering this video to you. So settle back. I interview Deacon Jim, and I'll come back to you at the end of that interview. So good day to you, Deacon James.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good, good. So what I wanted to do is to talk with you just generally about who you are, where you come from, what you've experienced as a man, as a black man. Let's we'll pretend like we've not met before, but you are Deacon James Norman. Tell me something about yourself.
Well, I was actually born and raised here in Chicago, one of the most segregated cities in the U.S. I was also raised on the west side of Chicago, probably one of the poorest communities in Chicago.
How far is the west side? I mean, what's
So when you think of the west side, and I know the West Loop has kind of moved significantly out, almost to Ashland, I would say.
Yeah, there's some nice real estate in the West Loop.
It's changed. What was Skid Row is now called the West Loop. So I would say right now from Ashland to Austin starts becoming the west side of Chicago, from actually 22nd Street, Cermak on the south, to, I will go as far as North Avenue. I can even go a little further on the north, all the way to Austin is the west side. And then I was what was called South Lawndale or East Garfield. And raised there by my great aunt and uncle, who raised my teenage unwed mother. They adopted and raised me. I attended Catholic school, Our Lady of Sorrows and Precious Blood.
Oh, really? So you're serving at where you went to school?
I went to Our Lady of Sorrows from first to fourth grade. And now I serve there as a deacon and have been a member there at that congregation for over 35 years.
Now, your name isn't scratched into any woodwork or bathroom stalls or anything when you were a kid there. I mean, that's all.
No, because they were still using corporal punishment at the time.
Okay, okay. The good old days. Okay. All right. So let me ask you, how old are you?
This is 60 for me. This is a significant year.
Okay.
2020, I'm 60 years old.
You'll get over it. You'll survive it. You'll survive it.
With God's help. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you're a West Sider. Now, how far was your home from Mother of Sorrows?
So Congress in California. So across the bridge, which only becomes significant because that's kind of moving into a different gang territory, and about 4 blocks west. So about 5 blocks away.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now your extended family, Chicago, Southerners, Northerners?
It's a great question because my great aunt and uncle, they came from Georgia after World War II, part of that great migration.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, part of that great migration to the north.
Okay. And so what was that? That after World War II, people coming home from service and jobs up north?
Looking for jobs and opportunities. And so one relative or neighbor would say, hey, I heard there are great jobs in Chicago. Then you get a situation where a family member would come up, get established. They would refer a relative or a former neighbor in the South up. They'd actually put them up and house them until they got on their feet and got a job. And then they would do the same. So just kind of this opening up the home to friends and family and relatives as they were trying to get themselves established.
So this would be in your family, this is what, your parents' generation and
and I'd say in this case, and their parents. So in the
Okay.
1940s,
Okay.
mid-40s, the migration from the South to Chicago after World War II. And my aunt and uncle, James and Dorothy Norman, actually bought a place, a 2-unit building with a basement apartment on the west side of Chicago. I think it was 1945 to be exact. We still own the property today.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah, we still own the property today.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Now, do you still have family down in Georgia?
I do. A lot of cousins down in Georgia. The youngest of what I'll call the stubs on my maternal side, the youngest was my grandmother who passed last year. But we still have a host of cousins in Georgia, Atlanta area, Columbus.
Okay. All right. Do you go down there and visit or?
Go down there, visit occasionally, yes,
Yeah.
at least once a year.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. So you're, so you're a part of history in this country. That great migration. Does that experience of being family of the Great Northern Migration, does that feel like a common experience amongst your acquaintances and your social network, or are you an outlier?
No, I don't feel like an outlier, and there is something of what I'll call the legacy of that I find very common.
Yeah.
So the notion of a house and a household moving to whatever it needs to be to sustain the family and friends and neighbors. So at one point in this three-bedroom apartment, remember it was a 2-unit with a basement apartment, we lived on the first floor. At one point, my bedroom and the living room were the same room. Mm. So the dining room. Here was a dining room table, and there's my bed beside it, because my great-grandmother, as she got older, came to stay with us where there was better health care. And then after that, my great-grandfather came to stay with us. And then when Great Lakes, the Naval Hospital, closed down, my great-uncle, came to stay with us. So I was always seeing our house change and configure to whatever the needs were.
Interesting.
And I find myself doing that with my own family. And I found others. So this notion of multi-generational households, the notion of aunts and uncles living in the household and providing care and mentoring and coaching and support, and filling in whatever voids may be there, I think is a rich part of that tradition and that migration to the north.
Yeah, that certainly has to, I'm speculating that would impact you, that family life or household means something different from, what we read about too often, or we know about, the single mom with, 2 kids at home, and it's the 3 of them, period. That's all that there is. And that's not your experience. I mean, you have
That's not my experience. So my experience would have been an unwed teenage mother, comes from Ohio, to her aunt's house, and is raised by her aunt, and then her aunt ultimately adopts her son. And so the benefit of 2 mothers. So in that household, there was plenty of support. I had 2 mothers.
Wow, that's interesting. What is that, I don't know, to be philosophical, or I don't know, highfalutin, does that experience affect you and how you minister, how you are in church? Does that give you a wisdom that maybe I don't have? I'm from a nuclear family.
Well, it may just provide a perspective that, with God's graces can provide what's needed at any point in time. And at many times we're called upon to change, pivot, and move directions for the care of others.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is certainly something that I saw and something that I model now. I think I also had the opportunity to see many faith traditions other than Catholicism, frankly.
Yeah.
My great aunt and uncle were originally Baptists who had to convert at that time for their nephew and their adopted son, Jamie, to go to Catholic school. There was no option for them. So they had to become Catholic for me to go to Catholic school.
Right.
Their desire, first and foremost, was a better education and safety. But it ended up being conversion to the Catholic faith and me becoming a deacon many, many years later.
Now, you're not hankering to go back to your Baptist roots, are you?
No.
Okay, good. Just checking. Now, a course I took years ago was on the psychological manifestation of wisdom, not the wisdom literature in Scripture, but wisdom. How are we, when we talk about being wise? What does that mean? And one of the characteristics that our social scientists, psychologists will say is that wisdom is often associated with flexibility and not an endorsement, but an ability to deal with ambiguity, that not everything is so cut and dried, but rather a wise person psychologically is, okay, I hear what you're saying, and you can shift a little bit, which is not to give up principles, but it's the ability to listen. And I'm wondering if that, I'll just put words in your mouth. It strikes me that expansive sort of extended family was an introduction to being willing to shift a little bit. It's not that, this is my space, you can't come in here, stay out. You're able to roll with the punches a little bit more because of the bit of people coming and going through your life.
Yeah, I think it does allow you to kind of to adjust and adapt,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when you're clear about the bigger purpose. So you will adjust and adapt for family, whether that be your parish family or whether that be your kind of nuclear family, your extended family.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've got that sense of higher purpose, you're willing to change and shift and look from different perspectives. I think, you're also willing to find the similarities rather than fixate on the differences. Mm-hmm. So you talked about Catholicism and take a Protestant faith, be a Baptist. And you say, okay, so where are the commonalities? What's the good of that versus against the good of Catholicism? And where are they both the same? And can we stay that line and find God? Can we find grace? Can we find love? And can we find mercy for one another? And I think it's possible.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Now, the grades 1 through 4, you said you were at Sorrows?
1 through 4 at Sorrows.
And then what?
And then 5th grade, I went to St. Mary's in Youngstown, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
That was the other part of the migration I talked about, raised by my great aunt and uncles. There were 8 great aunt and uncles in the Stubbs family, and that's a maternal line. 5 of the Stubbs sisters came to Chicago. 1 Stubbs sister, my grandmother, and an uncle went to Ohio following the manufacturing, specifically the steel industry in Pennsylvania and Ohio that were, serving Michigan, frankly, serving the auto industry. So I went there for 1 year to school at St. Mary's, and then I came back to Precious Blood for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then went on to high school at St. Ignatius.
Okay. Okay. You're an St. Ignatius guy. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your experience? What was your experience in those 3 different schools? You were the only black kid, or majority black kids, or was there racial tension, or what?
Well, at Precious Blood and Our Lady of Sorrows, it was majority black. And there were some black teachers, but we had nuns and we had priests and brothers in the school. And so I had great care, support, and love coming from the religious orders and from the priest and the brothers that were there in the school, and always felt a care for them. I mean, there are specific moments that I can remember where, for instance, the nuns making sure that in '68, when the riots were occurring, that we got home safely. They stood with us. We were concerned about what was going on, weren't clear what was going on. That we knew that they were concerned about us and were assuring our safety. At the same time, I think we were concerned about their safety in the community, being a black community on the west side of Chicago. There's another instance at Precious Blood. I remember the sister Regina driving us off to outing, an event, roller skating, I think it was, and a crazy driver kind of got in the way quickly. And although I was seat belted and sitting in the front, I remember her putting her arm across, and she was kind of clutching the wheel with one hand and the brake. And I just remember that as a great expression of love. And, and also at Precious Blood, there were brothers there who were probably on their way to priesthood. I perceive them as brothers on their way to priesthood, but they were, the basketball coach. They were the choir director, and others who really had a care and a love for the community. And I felt that and sensed that. And I think it was even the thought, perhaps this priesthood is something, there might be something there. People I know and love, respect, who've shown care for me, perhaps there's something there. At the same time where, I said, being in Chicago, it wasn't always a welcoming place for a person of color. I can remember just driving the car and being stopped by detectives for no other reason than I was in a particular neighborhood. Driving
DWB.
driving while black. I guess driving while black. And so recognize that if you're responsive, respectful, typically it passes without any issue. And that had been my experience. Once they say, oh, I was leaving work and I'm on my way home, or I was going to get something to eat. Or they'll ask, where do you go to school? Why are you? I went to Ignatius. You kind of get a pass because I had, so to speak, punched my ticket through what I'll call societal checkpoints that I think made me acceptable, and it's sometimes perceived as an exception against other stereotypes, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, but isn't that, something rises in me to find that galling, that I need to legitimate myself. There's this contrarian streak in me that, and I guess I can, understand sort of being abrasive myself is that, well, get off my case, man. I'm not doing anything. And that tension that we feel, well, did I suck it up? Did I, condone their offense of DWB? Or just, this is not a hill to die on. That's an experience that you had that I haven't had.
Yeah, I think, it is something that I'd seen others experience. It's something that I'd been told about, actually, in essence, almost trained to expect it and trained how to respond to it. It's a term oftentimes we'll say in the Black community, and I had to tell my son this just recently, and he's 39. It is the Black tax. All right? It is the tax for wearing a darker pigment and being of a darker hue. It means that, and here's a recognition. We all are inundated each and every day by images, be it on Twitter, be it on Facebook, be it on the media, be it in TV, be it on radio, by these images and these stereotypes. Each of us, irrespective of race and gender, carries some unconscious or implicit biases. And so recognizing what those are, how you are viewed by others, simply allows you to develop a strategy of how to respond and ultimately achieve whatever your desired outcomes are. And sometimes in some instances, the desired outcome is to get home alive.
Yeah.
In some instances, the desired outcome is to get a good grade. In some instances, the desired outcome is to get a good job performance rating or the next job. So you've got to figure out what those desired outcomes are, what the stereotypes are, and how to play and navigate through. It is a bit, that notion of the Black tax. Even people asking me questions. Well, how does that? And as if I speak for all Blacks, which I don't.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Black tax.
I was gonna ask you if you did.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay.
But that is part of sharing that perspective with you and saying, okay, and that's just my perspective from my experience, being from Chicago, being from the west side of Chicago, being raised by those who were part of the Great Migration to the North after World War II, being someone who's 60-ish. So you've got to take all that in the context when you take my perspective. You can't take that as stereotypical for all Blacks.
Right.
And then I also have to be aware of my biases. And there are things that, because of my biases, remember the things that I was told and taught to help me. Also, there's a shadow side to them. And I always have to be aware of that. So early on, when my parents told me that, baby, get your education, they can't take that away from you. They can't take that away from you. When they say, you've got to work twice as hard, that's all. Then who? Why is that? So you're telling me it isn't fair, right? And so what that means is, but now that was meant for my good, and so that I would excel academically and achieve all that they wanted me to achieve and thought that I could achieve. But what it does set up on the other side is I could enter Ignatius, where it was only 10% Black at the time, thinking, and then see, oh, they're not many of us here. They really maybe don't want us here. Maybe at times not feeling welcome, or even when I entered the work world, having almost put a barrier around myself, right? Because I was told they don't really want you here. It isn't safe here. You've got to work harder here. So I had to deal with my own thoughts, thinking, biases, so that I could, in essence, open up a bit and receive kind of the graces, the support, the mentoring and coaching that was happening around me that I could have been oblivious to.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Now you went to college?
Went to college, I started out at University of Chicago and then finished up at Northwestern.
Oh, okay.
At the same time, I was working my way through college. My great uncle passed when I was a senior in high school. And I know they had paid a lot for, I didn't know what it was. I knew they paid a lot for my education at Ignatius. They never complained about it, but after my uncle passed, I said, I've got to figure out how to pay for this myself. So I started working my way through college. I started at Oscar Mayer as a casual security guard. And literally, I just asked the question of I heard the word tuition reimbursement. I never heard that word before. So it's like, what's that? How do you get that? And they said, well, you need to be a full-time employee and they'll pay 50% of your education. I'm like, yeah, sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I began working full-time, moved from security to quality assurance, sanitation supervision, shipping supervision. By then I got my undergrad degree at Northwestern in psychology. Then there's an opportunity in human resources. I moved into human resources. And then after another 25 plus years, moved through various roles in human resources and had the advantage or ability to retire early at from Kraft Foods in 2013 as vice president of human resources.
Wow.
At the same time, I was being ordained.
Mm. Oh, okay.
So I'm not the smartest guy, but it kind of seemed like this timing seemed to work.
Wow.
And it was maybe time for me to go and explore the second half of my life, hopefully moving from great success and blessings I'd had in the first half on to what I'll call significance in the second half.
Mm-hmm. Now if I can do this, I'm going to, I've got a photo. Let's see here. Are you seeing that on the screen?
It's up. There you go.
Okay, so who are all these people?
Okay, so if we go to the right, the gentleman with no hair, that's my oldest, Jeremy.
Okay.
He is actually in human resources at the Chicago Board of Trade.
Okay.
That's his daughter, Avery, there. And next to Avery is his wife, Rochelle, Filipino, and that's their son, Samson. My youngest is standing there in the middle, which looks like shirt says doing it with the glasses. That's Aaron. He's our youngest aspiring actor. There right next to Aaron is Ethan. That's our, he was the baby at the time. That's my daughter, our middle daughter, Kristen, who's holding Ethan. Right behind Kristen is Paul Pasovich. So Kristen Norman is now Kristen Pasovich. And next to Paul is my nephew, Jalen, who's just starting school today at the University of North Texas. He's lived with us since he was 3. So the last 15 years. Right there kneeling is Juliana, who's a junior now at Marist High School on the south side. My wife, Kimberly, and Mariah's there, sitting between Kimberly and I. That's Kristen's oldest child. So we have now 5 grandchildren. One not pictured, 1-year-old is Isabella Pasovich. So Kristen and Paul's 3rd child.
And that old man in the gray jacket, that would be.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, was this a Christmas time? I'm admiring. Is it Paul? I'm admiring his sweatshirt.
Yes. This was this was a Christmas. This was our annual Christmas family photo. One of them.
Okay.
We caught up with Paul in future ones, and we all put on ugly outfits.
I didn't want to offer that, but okay.
Yeah. If I'd sent another one, we were all in ugly sweaters, and okay. I even have a Christmas suit now. So.
Okay. Oh, I've been tempted. Okay, that's cool. What's your ministry?
So the areas that I focus on now. There was the Provident Ministry, which was a ministry to the homeless on the south side of Chicago, which started by Father Howard Tuitt, who's my spiritual director. So I've remained in contact with that community, engaging them. And now with COVID, it's been through a 1-800 prayer service line that we've connected with them. And prior to that, I was meeting them at Corpus Christi Church, the 3rd Sunday of each month. And then in my own parish, obviously, beside the normal duties, it is a support to the homeless through our Dignity Breakfast. We serve over 200 men and women on the second and fourth Saturday of each month in our parish hall. Now we're serving breakfast sandwiches on the second and fourth Saturday of each month to homeless. And we do that. They come to our area, we bring out the sandwiches, and then they continue to move on.
And then, now you work for the Archdiocese.
Yeah, the blessing of working for the Archdiocese for the last 5 years as Director of Vicariate Operations for Vicariate 6, working with Bishop Perry on the south side of Chicago, and have the opportunity now to work with groupings of parishes as they move through Renew My Church.
Okay. All right. So that's keeps you out of trouble and busy, right?
Keeps me busy, certainly.
Yeah. All right. Now, we mentioned this before, to be clear that you're not here as the representative of anybody but yourself. There is, you speak as an adult Black man, deacon, man of faith, family man, held, important, responsible jobs in the workplace, and continue to do so. Is your experience, how might, if I were to be interviewing other Black deacons, how would their experiences differ from yours to the extent, I mean, is there something that we can say, or is that just a foolish question?
Yeah, no, I think there's a difference, and it has to do with 10 years of my 33-year career with Kraft Foods. I led diversity for Kraft Foods, so for a for-profit organization for 3 years. And then I came back, and that was Kraft Foods North America. And then I came back and led diversity and inclusion for Kraft Foods globally. And then I led it as Kraft became then Kraft Foods North America. So I had the responsibility to lead diversity initiatives in a for-profit organization. So I think I had a lot of time to actually acknowledge my failures in this space. I had a lot of time to interact with others who had more experience in this space, and others who had led organizations who were further along their diversity and inclusion journey. So that is a perspective that I bring. I find that my faith helps me with that, helped me then with that, and helps me now with that. I'd often say, if you wanted to break down that work and what we're talking about today in just very simple ways, it is what you're doing today, which I'm so grateful for. I'd always said the secret of my work as the Chief Diversity Officer for Kraft Foods was giving people room and space to discuss what previously had been undiscussable, and in ways where grace abounded.
Yeah, because if I'm afraid to even ask a dumb question for fear that it'll be misconstrued, I'm going to stay locked up in my misconceptions, because I'll never ask the question. I won't dare to. And so I think, I want to thank you very much for putting up with me. But it's because, if we don't trust each other, if I don't trust you, I wouldn't be able to ask you dumb questions. Because our experience growing up is different. In some ways, in many ways it's the same, but there are important differences that we've experienced in growing old. Some of us older than others. So, I guess let me ask a practical question. How do we allow that kind of space where I can ask the stupid question? I don't want to, at the beginning, as African American, is how that term has changed over the years, and now I guess, as I say, using the New York Times, their style manual, to the extent that means anything, but even to, how do we create a venue in which questions can be asked and conversation can be had without worrying about getting canceled, without being destroyed?
Well, I think, as you said, I think on a one-on-one basis, this invitation into a relationship whether it be coaching, whether it be kind of mentoring, whether it's just saying, hey, can I ask you a stupid question? And if there's some base of respect and some minimum base of trust there, I think you can build upon that. You can also, where there is none, you could also, as you've done so well and modeled here in our time together, said, look, I don't know. I might not even be phrasing that right. I don't mean to offend you, but I'm trying to understand and I'm trying to grow in this space. Is that okay? So I'm asking from that context. I don't have any opinion. I'm not coming from any place other than trying to understand and appreciate your perspective better. I think that's a great place to start. If someone is comfortable enough to do that, that's a great place to start. And I think you'll find once you do that, that people will genuinely be willing to sit down and share their perspective once they feel like it is to help your growth, your personal growth and understanding in a topic area, or to help you understand their perspective. And they feel like they're not going to be judged for having that perspective because it is just their perspective. So I think that's where grace from our faith really comes in. The notion you're going to give people grace.
And you would think that there's 500 or so deacons in the archdiocese. If we're not up for this kind of conversation, I don't have too much hope for the rest of the world. I mean, we're supposed to be, men of prayer, men of faith, men of open heart. And so maybe it's equally a challenge to us. On the one hand, it's also an opportunity for us to grow and to learn, and also to pray and to be in a posture to receive that grace, so that we can have conversations like this. So, so I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for our conversation today. So I'm not going to unduly abuse my privilege of talking with you. So final word from you, something I should have asked that I didn't, anything.
I think the notion is, here's to begin this discussion, others, and to move forward. I think we have to educate ourselves on all the perspectives that come to bear, right? And be really clear about where we're starting from with our own, and recognize our own flaws in that perspective, recognize our own biases. We have them. We can't help but have them. It doesn't make us less of who we are. It doesn't make us necessarily racist. It just makes us human and flawed. And if we start there, then I think we can engage in conversations with others. And I think we have to get to know individuals. Sounds ironic, but we need to get to know individuals to break down stereotypes.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. James Norman, Deacon Extraordinaire. God bless you and your family and the wisdom that you've shared with us. And I'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. God bless.
God bless. A word of gratitude to Deacon Jim for participating in this, and also gratitude to you for sticking around to the end. Now remember, again, please, this is only the beginning of meeting our neighbors. We are only at the beginning of our theological reflection. Lots and lots more data. More step one is to come. Right now, all that we are doing is getting to know one another. And I'm discovering that I can trust you, and I hope that you can trust me. The next video will be released as soon as I can finish editing it. Look for that in the next week or so. God bless you.